You all know how much I love a good historical fiction, but it can be hard to find ones that are not based on World War II. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I'm a mom to four. I love to homeschool, I love to read good books, and I love to share both of those things on this channel. So if you also like those things, please consider subscribing. So today I am recommending 5 historical fiction books that are not set during World War II. And April over at Getting Hyyge With It is going to recommend 5 more for you. April's channel was actually the first booktube channel I ran across on YouTube. I did not even know there was such a thing as booktube. And I just love her channel for many reasons. She's just really authentic and real, and she just shares a lot about the books she loves and doesn't love, obviously, but also her life and different things like that that I just really enjoy. Also, she loves historical fiction, but she has a number of other genres she reads, a lot of like thriller, horror, contemporary. She reads pretty broadly. So please go check out her channel, subscribe to her channel. I will link it all below for you. But for my 5 books, I have some that are just slam dunks for me and others that I read like 10 years ago but have still stuck with me. So I'm going to recommend those as well. So the first one I want to recommend to you is As Bright as Heaven. So I love this book. It was my favorite book of 2020. It is about the Spanish flu in Philadelphia. As most of you know, I have a PhD in microbiology, so anything that involves kind of infectious disease and pandemics, I really like to read about, and I know some people don't. So kind of take this recommendation as you will. But this is about a family. It's about a family living in Philadelphia. The dad got a job at a mortuary and brings the family in, and they had just started setting up their lives when the Spanish flu hit. And it hit Philadelphia really hard. It just really went from house to house to house. And you get to experience how that would have felt because Susan Meissner just did a wonderful job of drawing you into the fear of just not being able to understand what's going on. And what I really like is the fact that part of the story is kind of the family and they're fearing for themselves and their friends and things like that. But you're also getting the business side of the mortuary, the fact that the city can't handle all of these people dying and what do you do with them? And it was just so overwhelming. But as you kind of come off of that, because the whole book does not just keep you in the Spanish flu, it also tells a story of the family as they're recovering from the effects of the flu and how they learn to find hope. And in their case, they find hope in this little flu orphan boy that they take in and start to raise, and they just find a lot of joy and healing from that interaction. I loved this book. I highly recommend it. The next book I have somehow seemed to have lost in the move. I don't know where my copy is Water for Elephants. And I have forgotten the author, but you can read it here because I'll put up a picture. This is a story that's set in America during the 1930s Depression era. It's set around this boy, man, I think he's like late teens, early 20s, and he has recently dropped out of veterinary school. And for some reason, he's like trying to get out of town. And so he hops a train. And he finds out that the train he hopped onto is a circus train. And then he kind of joins the circus. And he has a lot of animal handling skills, so they put him in charge of a lot of the animals, especially the elephants. And this book just does a wonderful job of bringing you into kind of the hardships. One, the hardships of circus life. And 2, the hardships of that time frame when nobody was coming to the circus, everybody was struggling with money. What did that do to the people in charge of the circus and the people who were in the circus? And it was just one of those heart-wrenching books because there is some cruelty involved in this. 1, with the animals, and 2, kind of like domestically. And so that can be a little bit hard, but there's just a lot of detail of what it would have been like to be in the circus and some of these people who were just outcasts of society, how they did find their joy and happiness here, how they found camaraderie and friendship and things like that as well. So there were so many aspects of this story that I just really enjoyed. It is an intense read as well as an atmospheric read. It's hard to explain exactly, but I really, really enjoyed it. So I would recommend Water for Elephants if you haven't picked it up. It's been out for like ever. So odds are you might have already read it, but if you haven't, it's a really good one. Next book is near and dear to my heart as well. It was, I think, the second favorite of last year, and that was The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. Oh, this book is so good. It is more historical fantasy. There is a lot of historical elements in it, especially about that time frame in Russia and folklore and things like that. So I would consider it historical fiction. So this is about a girl named Vasya in the 1600s of Russia. She's growing up kind of in a farm on the northern part of Russia. So when she was born, her mother died. And so it was just up to her father to raise her and her older siblings. And he gets remarried to this woman who does not appreciate her spiritedness, because Vasya inherited magic from her mother. It wasn't super apparent. She had to kind of work through how to foster that. But it wasn't just that. I feel like for her, it was more of her willfulness and the fact that she did not want to just conform to what was expected of her as a woman in Russia during that time frame. And there's this frost demon that was a big part of the story. And I've really enjoyed his storyline in this book, as well as there's this priest who comes from Moscow who is very devout Orthodox Christianity, and his butting up against kind of this natural tendencies of the people, especially in the country, to believe these things like folklore and things like that, and how he approached Vasya, who was clearly different. So I love this book. So I would warn you, it has a slow on-ramp, which is probably the number one complaint I see for this book. But I loved it because I love historical fiction. And for me, there was a lot of historical elements in that on-ramp where you just get to learn a lot about what it would have been like to live there. And you get to really invest in her character, which I found very valuable, especially as you're moving throughout the other two books, is just that first probably half of this book, which feels a little bit more like setup. But if you know that going in, I think you do much better with this book. So yes, The Bear and the Nightingale, the whole series, I recommend. Another book that I read a while ago that you may have already read, but if you haven't, you should. It's The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. I think this is his debut novel. It's such a good book. It's another example of a book that taught me a ton about an area of the world that I didn't know much about, which in this case, it's Afghanistan. And it's told in kind of two timelines. It starts in 1975 with these two boys who I think are like 12. They're preteen. And one of the boys is rich. He's from a rich family. And the other boy is the son of the servant of his family. But they have a really close friendship, a friendship that means a lot to them. But then there's this incident that happens, which there are some trigger warnings on that part of sexual assault, and it is pretty tough. But the rest of the book deals with that, and I think it deals with it in a very beautiful way. Then it goes to present day, which is more like early 2000s or something like that, when this boy becomes a man. Now he's a wealthy man in America, and he hears something, I think, from this boy that used to be his friend. And he goes back to Afghanistan, and he goes back to try to redeem himself, to really make right some wrongs of what his choices caused and what happened because of those to especially his friend. It really draws you into that time frame, which you're talking a lot of those tribal groups in Afghanistan, and it's just very dangerous for him to go back there, especially as an American in the early 2000s. So really, really good book. Last book I want to mention that does not have anything to do with World War II is another book about Russia, which I just realized that now. It's A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I loved this book, and it was one of those books that surprised me because it is a slow read. It's very atmospheric. It's very character driven. It's about this man, this count, in the early 30s. So when there was the change of powers from the aristocrats and the royalty to more the common people. And so there was just a lot of unrest around that. And he, for some reason, became kind of a person of interest to the new government, and he was put on house arrest, which just meant that he had to spend out the rest of his life at this hotel that was across from the Kremlin, but he could not step foot out of the building or he would be shot on sight. And so this story is told from inside the hotel, the whole thing. And you would think, and as I did at first, that can't be enough to tell. And it's not a small book. It's a fairly large book, but the main character was just awesome. Count, I think it was Rostov. It was just really fun to be in his head. And then there were storylines of things that were going on, of friendships made and people needing help and things like that moved the story along. But what I was there for was just to watch him. As his character grew, I mean, he started out a little bit more self-centered into just kind of the musings of what it would feel like to be stuck in one place, and how could you make meaning out of life? How could you still be fulfilled and things like that? And I loved it. It was really good. I know a lot of people struggle with how slow it is. Again, if you know that going in, it makes the story so much more beautiful. So I highly recommend this book. So those are the ones. These are my recommendations for books you want to pick up if you are just seeing a ton of World War II historical fiction books, or you really just don't want to dive into the emotions of World War II at this point in time. I highly recommend picking up one of these books. But also don't forget to head over to April's channel and see what 5 books she's going to recommend, because I'm sure they're going to be good ones. And so that is what I have for this video. So thank you all for taking the time to watch. If you liked it, please consider liking it, subscribing to the channel if you aren't already subscribed. And otherwise, I will see you in the next book video. All right, take care.